Claude Cowork just released one of its biggest updates so far. We now have Cowork projects, and this will completely change the way that you use Claude Cowork if you know the right way to use them. Unfortunately, though, I think most people are going to be confused about how these work and are going to end up not using projects to their fullest potential. So in this video, I want to show you what projects are and how you can get the most out of using them. Claude Cowork projects can be found in the Claude desktop app. Of course, make sure that you have the Cowork tab selected at the top, and you'll now see projects over here on the left. You can think of each project as a self-contained workspace centered around a specific goal or topic. Here, for instance, I have a project called Research. Selecting this will then open up the project. The first thing I want to draw your attention to are all the recent chats right here that I started from within this project. This helps you keep everything organized, because in the past, all your tasks appeared here under recents and there was no way to organize them. But now, whenever you start a new task from within a project, they'll all appear right here. But to think of projects as just a folder management system would be a huge mistake, because projects are so much more powerful than that. First, because every project over here on the right has a section to give it a custom set of instructions. You can also set up tasks to run from within each project on a schedule. And in addition to that, we have this context section. This shows you all the files that this project has access to. Here it has access to a folder on my computer called Research, and within that are several subfolders, and within these subfolders are some more subfolders and files as well. And then finally, each project has a project-wide memory system. If you want Claude to remember something inside a project, just tell it and it'll add it to the memory section. Let's set up a project together so you can understand how to use each of these different sections. Setting up a project is very easy. Come over on the left where it says projects and click on the plus icon. Here you'll see three different choices. You can start from scratch, and selecting this will allow you to put in a project name, the instructions. You can also add files, and you can choose where this project is going to live. Every project needs to exist within a folder on your computer. So I can select this and choose a folder on my computer where I want that project to live. Coming back to the other options though, the second one is to import a project that you created over inside the regular Claude chat. I've tested this a little bit and I honestly haven't found it to work all that well, so I wouldn't suggest that you import a project. You can either start from scratch or use the third option, which is to use an existing folder. This will allow you to choose an existing folder on your computer that can then be used for this project. So if you've already set up a system through Claude Cowork where you have different folders for different projects before projects was a real thing in Cowork, this is the choice that you want to go with. Selecting one of these folders, you'll notice that as soon as you do, it looks very similar to starting from scratch. We have the folder selected up here. You can then give it a name and a set of instructions. For this demo though, I think I want to start from scratch. So I'll go back to this screen and click Start from Scratch. Here I'll give this one a name. So let's call this one Bookkeeping. Next, you need to put in the instructions for this project. One mistake I see people making is that they try to cram everything into the instructions. This is very broad. It just kind of explains what this project is going to be used for and what role Claude should take on when it's working inside this project. You shouldn't put in here actual workflows. We are going to use skills for those. So for this one, I'm just going to tell it that this is a folder or a project that I use to keep track of all of my bookkeeping, my P&Ls, my charts of accounts, all of that. And when Claude is working inside of this, it should take on the role of an expert bookkeeper. Next, you have the option of adding files. I would not use this option. If you have files that you want Claude to have access to inside this project, just drop them inside the folder that we're going to create right now for this project. To create a project folder, you have to select right here and choose where in your computer you want that folder to live. The name of that folder will match the name of the project. So if I select my desktop, a folder will appear on my desktop called Bookkeeping. I'm going to select iCloud as my location so it's backed up. Once you have the location set up, you'll also notice down here that by default, memory is on, and then you can click on Create. Here we can see our new bookkeeping project. If I want to start a new task inside this project, I can do that from right within this text box. For instance, I can say to it, add this to your memory. I use QuickBooks Online. And now returning back to the bookkeeping project by clicking right here, I can come over to memory and I see that it added a note here that I use QuickBooks Online. So that's how easy it is to use memory and how easy it is to set up a project. When projects first came out, I heard a lot of people on Twitter complaining that this already existed in Cowork. You could already create this exact same setup just by creating a new project for each folder and then adding a file to each of those folders called instructions and memory. And yes, you could have done that. I did that myself, but I think projects are so much better. First of all, projects are just faster. In the past, if you wanted to use that custom folder system, every time you started a new task, you'd have to select here on the dropdown and find the folder that corresponded with the folder project you wanted to work in. Now, all you have to do is click on the left here on the name of your project and you're inside of it. It's much faster. In addition to that, now with projects, both instructions and memory are set up by default, and it is a lot cleaner. Here is the bookkeeping folder that Claude Cowork set up for me when I created my bookkeeping project. And notice what's not in here. There's nothing in here. In the past, if you wanted to create instructions for a folder, you would have to create a markdown file in here called claude.md that would act as the instructions. And if you wanted a memory file, that would be a separate file as well. And that just cluttered up the folder. Imagine, for example, that you use this folder a lot and there are a bunch of invoices in here. And somewhere cluttered in there, there's also a memory file for Claude and an instruction file for Claude. It would be very easy to accidentally delete that. It kind of looks a little bit messy and it's just not as clean and organized. Now, all of that exists inside your project. We have the instructions here, we have the memory here, and they're not cluttering up your actual folders that you're using on your computer. In addition to that, we of course have all of our chats organized in here, which didn't exist with the old system. And overall, I just think it's a lot more organized and a lot more user-friendly for the average user. But projects are only useful if you use them the right way. And I think a lot of people are going to be asking, how do you actually use them? How do you balance using files, folders, projects, instructions, skills? There seem to be a lot of overlap between them. So this is the way I would think of this. Folders contain the files on your computer. This is your work product. If you're a marketer, for instance, it contains all of the sales copy that you're actually working on. If you run a business, these may be folders with all your bookkeeping. Projects, on the other hand, are where you actually do your work. You come in here, tell Claude Cowork what you want it to do, and it does the work for you. And within this are instructions. Now, instructions should only define what the project exists for and the goals. It should not contain any workflows. So for instance, if this is a bookkeeping project, you shouldn't put into the instructions how to actually do bookkeeping. You should instead put in here a goal, like I want you to help me with my bookkeeping, and this is a place to organize all of my bookkeeping records, but the actual workflows themselves should only exist as skills. Skills can be found again by clicking on Customize and clicking on Skills, and you can see all your skills here. You can add a new one by clicking on the plus icon and click Create with Claude. And you can actually describe to Claude exactly what skill you want to create. Now, I get asked this question a lot. We have all these skills inside the skills section. Can I just take all of these, come into one of my projects and add them as the instructions inside the project? And you can do that. However, it's going to be very inefficient because every time you start a new task inside a project, it's going to load all of your instructions. But if you need to use a skill, it's only going to load the skills that it actually needs. So here inside my skills, you see I have dozens of different skills. It's not going to load all of these every time I start a new task. It's only going to load the skills that it needs to use. This saves a lot of tokens and makes your task run a lot faster. In addition to that, skills can be used inside of any project or just in a normal task that's not part of a project, which means you never have to copy the instructions and paste them somewhere else. They're always accessible no matter what task you're using. So all your workflows should exist as skills. They should not be inside the instructions section. And then finally, we have memory. Memory is just used as you are sending Claude different tasks. If you wanted to remember something so you don't have to repeat it next time, you can just tell it in the chat, remember this, and it'll add it to the memory section. So let's put this all together and I'll show you an example of how this system works. Let's say I run a social media marketing company. So on my computer, I have a folder called Central Command, and within that, I have folders for each of my clients, client A, client B, and client C. And within each folder, I have all the graphics I'm creating for them for like Instagram, and I have a content schedule for each client as well. Coming into Claude itself, I've created a project for each of these clients. Here's one for client A, client B, client C. And all three of these use the exact same skills. I can find those by clicking again on Customize, Skills. You can see all my skills here. So maybe I help them all write scripts for the YouTube videos. I have a skill for that. I have a skill for scheduling videos that have already been created. And I have another one here for doing research. I can run any of these skills inside of any of these projects without having to copy and paste instructions. But I also have another project here called Central Command. This encompasses all of my client folders. Over here on the right under context, you can see the folder for client A, B, and C inside the Central Command folder. So every day I could come in here and say things like, what needs to get done across all of my different clients? What actual work do I have to do today? And it'll be able to look at all of my client folders and tell me what needs to get done. Then there are two final pieces of Claude Cowork projects. The first is scheduled tasks. So like I said, every day I ask it what needs to get done today. But instead of typing that in myself, I can set up a scheduled task here, come and create a new one, and tell it every morning, I want you to go through all my client folders and see what tasks need to get done that day, and then to actually put together a report that I can read every morning. The more scheduled tasks that you can create, the less work you end up having to do. So putting this all together, I think, is the best way to use Claude projects. It takes advantage of the best uses for instructions, memory, and skills while having one organized place for each different area of your life or business. However, there is one final missing piece that we didn't cover. Click on the left here where it says Customize, and then click on Connectors. These are third-party tools that you can connect up with Claude Cowork. I have connectors to Asana, Gmail, Google Drive, and Notion, for instance. The problem with this, though, is that these connectors are way underpowered. But there's an easy fix for it. If you click on this video right here, I'll show you how you can connect an easy tool that allows you to overpower Claude Cowork and give it a lot more capabilities than these default connections. So if you want to be able to get the most out of connectors, click on this video right here and find out how to set up that workflow. And I'll see you over here in just 1 second. Bye for now.